This review for Die Another Day has spoilers. So you live to die another day. Ha! Alright, like I said in that video of my reaction to the news of No Time to Die being postponed, I mentioned that I am still going to complete the spoiler review for Die Another Day. And like I mentioned, it is kind of timely that this postponement happened because Die Another Day is the last movie for Pierce Brosnan. And after this movie, it would be the start of the Daniel Craig James Bond stint of movies. So that way, 4 weeks prior to the release of No Time to Die on November 25th, that I will start reviewing the Daniel Craig series of James Bond movies, as they are all connected within its story arc. For this review, for Die Another Day, if the movie release date for No Time to Die was April 10th, you would have watched this movie starting the week of Friday, March 6, 2020. And this marks the 20th movie in the James Bond franchise. My rating for Die Another Day is a 3 out of 5, and here's why. Die Another Day, originally released back in 2002, it is directed by Lee Tamahori. This is Pierce Brosnan's last portrayal of James Bond. It also stars Halle Berry, Toby Stephens, Rosamund Pike, and Rick Yoon. The movie starts in North Korea, where James Bond is on a mission already, infiltrating the base of Colonel Moon, as he is posing as a weapons buyer. Once he gets to the military base in North Korea with Colonel Moon, he is compromised as they would get information that he is actually a British spy and not this buyer. The weapons that he was supposed to buy are these armed hovercrafts, to which it would lead into this battle scene with the hovercrafts, as these hovercrafts would have to navigate through the demilitarized zone where there's a lot of landmines. As they were fighting on top of a hovercraft, Bond would manage to pin Colonel Moon to the hovercraft fan, and that hovercraft went over a cliff into a waterfall river. At the end of this action sequence, we see that James Bond would eliminate Colonel Moon. There, Bond would get captured, and it will lead into the title credit sequence. This title credit sequence features the song Die Another Day by Madonna. It's an electro pop song. I know that there's not a lot of people that like that song, but I do enjoy that song. I thought it was really cool at the time, a new age way to introduce new James Bond music that is other than a pop ballad. What's unique about this title credit sequence is it told a story within that title credit sequence. We see scenes of James Bond getting tortured by the North Korean army. It is a really clever title credit sequence. Once we return to the movie, we would see that it is 14 months later. That is 14 months later from that incident. James Bond would be released, but this release is in exchange for a captured Zhao. Zhao being Colonel Moon's right-hand man. Bond would find out that he got released because they thought he was giving away secrets. But in a personal conversation with M, he told her that he wouldn't do that, and that there's somebody setting him up. Like he says in the movie, the same person who set me up then set me up again to get Zhao out. Bond would have to stay quarantined under Her Majesty's Secret Service, but would eventually escape and go to work on his own. He would get intel that Zhao is in Havana, Cuba. Bond would then gather more intel and find out there is a clinic that does DNA makeovers. At a hotel that caters to the clinic, he would run into Jinx. In that meeting with Jinx, Jinx would come out of the water like Ursula Andress did in Dr. No, and casually talking, they would end up hooking up. And this is the first time we really see James Bond in a very intense sex scene. And basically it's like a release for him because he had been stuck in a North Korean prison for 14 months. Bond would eventually make his way to the clinic. He would also notice that Jinx was going to that clinic too. There he would find Zhao. They would get in a fight. In separate scenes, we would see Jinx eliminate the main doctor of that clinic. At the end of that action sequence in the clinic, Zhao would eventually escape, as well as Jinx. During that fight though, Bond would manage to grab Zhao's necklace, which has a bullet as a pendant, and in that bullet he would unscrew, and inside were diamonds. Those diamonds had the GG insignia for Gustav Graves. And with his contact in Cuba, they would realize that these are African conflict diamonds. There we see Bond fly back to London to investigate Gustav Graves. He would go to this fencing school that Gustav Graves trains in, with the head instructor Verity, who is played by Madonna. I believe this is the first time the performer of the title song is also an actress in the movie. Not only James Bond would meet Gustav Graves through Verity, but Bond would also meet Gustav Graves' publicist, Miranda Frost. Bond would pick a fight with Gustav Graves. At the end, Bond would win. After the fight in the fencing school, Bond would go and meet up with M. And then Bond would meet up with Q. And like I said, there's a lot of tributes and references to the old James Bond movies. And with James Bond walking through Q's workshop, he would see all the unique devices back in the day from the previous James Bond movies, like the jetpack and the knife that comes out of the suitcase. Q would give him his watch, and he would reference it saying, "This is your 20th one." Q would give him this high frequency ring, which has the ability to shatter bulletproof glass. And the last thing James Bond is introduced with is the Aston Martin Vanquish, or as Q calls it, the Vanish. It is the first car that has the cloaking mechanism, or the stealth mechanism, to make it look invisible. With all the bells and whistles, and with the last movie, The World Is Not Enough, being disappointing when it comes to the technology and armaments on the car. We'll get to it once we get to that battle with the car. Bond would travel to Iceland per Gustav Graves' invitation to witness the display and debut of his Icarus project. Once there at this ice palace, Bond would see Jinx, as well as meeting up with Miranda Frost. At the Icarus presentation, we see that Icarus is a satellite that is one big mirror that reflects light onto the Earth. This way it can provide sunlight to the dark parts of the world. At this point in the movie, this is where we find out that Colonel Moon is actually Gustav Graves, who fully underwent the treatment at this clinic, where they exchange and transplant different DNA to where they do these transplants to make you look like a different person. That's another reference to another previous James Bond movie. Gustav Graves would tell Zhao in that scene that he is surprised that he's fooling James Bond and believing that he is this one Gustav Graves. Jinx would go investigate this dome that is right next door to the Ice Palace, which is said to be a diamond mine, but in all actuality, it's just a front. Albeit Jinx would get caught, and then James would investigate the dome himself. There, he would see that Jinx is all tied up with the laser. One of Gustav Graves' henchmen was there. They would start fighting. They would accidentally turn on all these lasers, and it's a pretty cool laser fight. And then I like the ending of it. Bond would tell Jinx to go into the Ice Palace and find Miranda Frost, who is also an MI6 agent. And then Bond would confront Gustav Graves. And he says the line with the title of the movie, "So you live to die another day." And then he would also know that he is Colonel Moon. But one thing he didn't know is that Miranda Frost was a double agent. She was the one on the inside that provided that information that compromised Bond's mission in the beginning, as well as trying to get Zhao out of prison. She is working with Colonel Moon, or Gustav Graves. In a separate scene, we would see Jinx get trapped in the room in the Ice Palace. Bond would escape the Gustav Graves' dome. The floor that they were in was a level up and it was made of glass, so he used that ring device to escape. And then we see him run to that jet sled that was in the beginning of the scenes entering into the Ice Palace. While in that jet sled, Gustav Graves would use Icarus as his weapon. Icarus is actually a weapon that shoots down a condensed beam of light, but then they would focus that beam of light onto the Ice Palace to melt the Ice Palace and drown Jinx, which they trapped her in that room. Then we would see a pretty cool car battle scene as James Bond would get in the Aston Martin Vanquish and battle against Zhao in the Jaguar XKR. And both cars are equipped with weaponry, whether it be on defense or offense. It was a cool little battle showing all the different technology in the car. Bond would manage to kill Zhao and save Jinx. Next, they would go to South Korea, where they go to the US base near the demilitarized zone. Bond and Jinx would get tasked with the mission of eliminating Gustav Graves. Once on that mission, they would be unable to get the sniper shot off, so they would have to get on the plane where Gustav Graves and the rest of the people associated with him are getting on. There, Gustav Graves would meet his father, who was on the plane as well. His father would disapprove of what Colonel Moon did to himself, and Colonel Moon, or Gustav Graves, would kill his father. Gustav Graves was basically wanting to make North Korea a powerhouse. His plan was to use the Icarus to beam down the light and destroy all the mines in the DMZ. There, armed forces from North Korea could start attacking the South. His goal was for North Korea to rule all of Korea and possibly the world. With Jinx and Bond aboard the airplane, Bond would battle Gustav Graves and Jinx would battle Miranda Frost. Gustav Graves was wearing this electric vest that was made for him, where everything he touches he could electrocute somebody. During the fight scene between Bond and Gustav Graves, there would be a big hole made on the side of the airplane. Jinx would kill Miranda and Bond would kill Gustav Graves. It was a very exciting end to Gustav, as he was holding on the side of the plane where the hole is because he got pushed out, and with the parachute he was wearing, it got sucked into one of the propellers, the jet propellers of the plane. Bond and Jinx would narrowly escape that falling plane by launching the helicopter that was in it in the cargo hold. In the final scenes of the movie, we would see Moneypenny use that VR machine used earlier in the movie by James Bond, where James Bond performed a training exercise. In this case, Moneypenny would use it to pretend make out with James Bond when you think it was going to end there. It was a funny scene. But the true ending, of course, with all the previous James Bond films at this point, was James Bond making out with the Bond girl, Jinx. Die Another Day, you could say, is basically a remake of Diamonds Are Forever, as Gustav Graves' concept was similar to Blofeld's concept in that movie, where the story had him transform into a different person, and that there's the satellite weapon that has the ability to eliminate and blow up stuff. And of course the diamonds. The diamonds are needed to be installed on that satellite to help that satellite. And then, like I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of references to the old James Bond movies. The story of Die Another Day, it was pretty typical for a James Bond movie. It is enjoyable for the most part. There are a lot of plot holes, but for what it is, you just have to enjoy the movie. There was a lot of over-the-top stuff in this movie. I know that with the writers, they did this in good faith and tribute to all the previous James Bond movies. since it is the 20th film of the franchise. Even for back then, some of the CGI used in this movie, you could tell it is fake. And you can see some of the stuff depicted with James Bond doing these stunts in the movie, overly ridiculous. Some of the dialogue, the quips James Bond would say is rather corny. But of the 4 Pierce Brosnan James Bond movies, Die Another Day is my favorite. Despite it being not the greatest James Bond movie, it is personally my favorite. And that's it for my review of Die Another Day. And that does conclude the first 20 films before Daniel Craig starts his stint as James Bond. Where with the Daniel Craig James Bond movies, it starts a whole new story arc from the beginning. I'll return back to you with another James Bond review, which is the start of the Daniel Craig James Bond movies, when it comes closer to the release of No Time to Die in November. Please like this video, subscribe to the SpellGo YouTube channel if you haven't, and as always, thank you for watching.